Please. I don't know where I am. I don't know who I am. The words hung in the air as Sophia stared down at the man slumped against the graffitied warehouse wall. His charcoal suit was torn and filthy, designer shoes caked in mud that didn't belong anywhere near the Sacramento railyard. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold, wide, terrified, scanning the abandoned warehouses like he'd woken up on another planet. Her worn sneakers crunched over broken glass as she took a cautious step closer, her backpack digging into her shoulders from the weight of the day's earnings. 2 weeks sleeping in these abandoned buildings had taught her to recognize danger, and everything about this screamed wrong. Rich men in $1,000 suits don't end up unconscious in rail yards by accident. Hey, she said softly, kneeling down but keeping her distance. Can you stand? We need to. He flinched violently, pressing back against the wall. Please don't call them. I don't know why, but I can't let them find me. That's when she heard it. Sirens wailing in the distance, growing closer. Her eyes snapped to the rail yard entrance just as a black SUV with tinted windows rolled past, moving slowly, deliberately, searching. The Rolex on his wrist caught the fading sunlight, glinting beneath layers of grime. Sophia's stomach twisted. Someone hadn't just abandoned this man. Someone wanted him to disappear. The SUV's brake lights flared red. It was turning around. She had maybe 30 seconds to decide, walk away and pretend she'd seen nothing, or help a stranger who might bring a nightmare crashing down on the fragile life she'd barely started building. Little did Sophia know, that single decision would shatter everything she thought she knew about her own existence. To understand how she ended up in this impossible situation, we have to go back to 3 weeks earlier, to the day her entire world quietly began to unravel. Before we get into that, here's a special shout-out to Martinez Kowalski watching from Toronto, Canada. Thank you for being one of our amazing supporters and engaging with the channel. A character in the story was named in your honor. If you'd also like to get a shout-out in the next video, please like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from, and you'll be given a shout-out. Thank you. Now let's get into the story. 3 weeks earlier, Sophia Martinez sat at the worn kitchen table in her final foster home, watching Ms. Chen shuffle through paperwork with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times before. The social worker's kind eyes couldn't quite hide the exhaustion behind them as she slid a folder across the table. Happy 18th birthday, Sophia, Ms. Chen said softly. I wish I had better news for you today. Sophia nodded, her hands folded in her lap. She'd known this day was coming since she turned 17. Aging out of the foster care system wasn't a surprise. It was an inevitability she'd been preparing for since the moment she understood what 18 meant in her world. The youth transition shelter on Franklin Street has a bed available for you starting Monday, Ms. Chen continued, pulling out a pamphlet. They offer job placement assistance and— I already have a job, Sophia interrupted gently. Ray's Diner downtown. I've been working weekends for 6 months. Ms. Chen's expression softened with something that looked like relief mixed with sadness. That's good, Sophia. That's really good. But I need you to understand the limitations of what's available. The shelter has a 90-day maximum stay. After that, you'll need to find your own housing, and on a server's wage in Sacramento. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I understand, Sophia said, taking the folder. Thank you for everything you've done for me, Miss Chun. Really. After the social worker left, Sophia climbed the stairs to the small bedroom she'd shared with 2 other girls for the past 14 months. Her belongings fit into 2 black garbage bags, mostly clothes from Goodwill, a few books from the library's free cart, and a beat-up backpack that had survived 3 different placements. As she tied the second bag closed, she heard the patter of small feet in the hallway. 7-year-old Emma appeared in the doorway, her foster sister's eyes already red from crying. Behind her, 9-year-old Marcus tried to look brave, but failed miserably. You're really leaving? Emma whispered. Sophia knelt down, pulling both kids into a hug. I have to, sweetie. But I'm not disappearing. I promise I'll come visit. That's what Tyler said, Marcus muttered, referencing the teenager who'd aged out 6 months earlier and hadn't been seen since. And Jessica. And I'm not them, Sophia said firmly, meeting his eyes. I promise. She wasn't sure if she was lying or not. The first week of freedom felt like walking a tightrope without a net. The youth transition shelter provided a shared room with 3 other girls, a communal bathroom, and a 10 p.m. curfew that made working late shifts at Ray's Diner nearly impossible. Sophia picked up every available hour, working doubles whenever the manager would let her, pocketing tips in an envelope she kept hidden in her pillowcase. By day 7, she'd saved $243. By day 8, she lost her bed. "I'm sorry, Sophia," the shelter coordinator said, not quite meeting her eyes. "We're over capacity. You're on the priority wait list, but we have families with children who—" "I understand," Sophia said for the second time in 2 weeks, taking the pamphlet for emergency services and walking out into the Sacramento heat. She spent that night on a bench near the Capitol building, her backpack clutched to her chest, jumping at every sound. When dawn finally broke, she walked to Ray's Diner for her morning shift, smelling like the streets and trying to ignore the pitying looks from the cook. That afternoon, exhausted and desperate, Sophia wandered near the Southern Pacific railyard. The abandoned warehouses there had a reputation: dangerous, populated by people who'd fallen through every safety net society pretended to offer. But when she found a relatively dry corner in one building, tucked away from the main entrances with a view of anyone approaching, something in her chest loosened slightly. It wasn't safe. It wasn't home. But it was shelter, and that was more than she'd had the night before. On her third morning in the railyard, Sophia discovered Grace Community Shelter during a desperate search for a bathroom and a place to wash her face. Pastor Raymond, a soft-spoken man in his 60s with kind eyes and weathered hands, took one look at her and offered her breakfast without asking questions. "We serve meals Monday through Saturday," he said, sliding a plate of scrambled eggs and toast across the counter. "And if you're looking for work, we could use help in the kitchen. Can't pay you, but you'd get meals and shower access." Sophia's throat tightened. "I'd like that. Thank you." "Thank me by showing up," he replied with a gentle smile. "Lot of folks make promises they can't keep. I got a feeling you're not one of them." She showed up every morning after her overnight shifts at Ray's, volunteering for 2 hours before catching a few hours of sleep in the railyard. The routine kept her functional, kept her moving forward when every instinct screamed at her to give up. On her 14th night in the railyard, Sophia lay on a flattened cardboard box, listening to trains rumble past in the darkness. Her body ached from double shifts, her stomach growled despite the meal at Grace Community, and her mind raced with calculations that never quite added up: rent deposits, first and last month, utilities, transportation. She wondered how long she could sustain this existence before something inside her broke, or before something outside her did. Have you ever had to choose between pride and survival? What would you have done in Sophia's position? Let me know in the comments. That's when she heard footsteps crunching through gravel near the warehouse entrance. Slow, deliberate, wrong for this time of night. Sophia sat up silently, every sense on high alert. Through a gap in the wall, she saw flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. Searching, she pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing, until the footsteps faded. But sleep didn't come easy after that. And the next evening, everything changed when she found the man in the expensive suit. The SUV's headlights swept across the railyard one final time before disappearing around the corner. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs as she made her decision in the span of 3 seconds. "Can you stand?" she asked urgently, reaching for the stranger's arm. He nodded weakly, allowing her to pull him to his feet. Up close, she could see the details her instincts had already registered. The suit was Tom Ford or something equally expensive. The watch on his wrist probably cost more than she'd earned in 5 years at Ray's Diner. And his hands, despite the dirt, were soft and uncalloused. Professional hands. "We need to move. Now," Sophia said, slinging his arm over her shoulders to support his weight. "Can you walk?" I think so," he stammered, his voice rough with confusion and exhaustion. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safer than here." She guided him through a gap in the fence she'd been using for weeks, leading him through a maze of back alleys that would keep them off the main streets. The stranger stumbled frequently, his expensive shoes catching on uneven pavement, but he trusted her lead without question. That trust made Sophia's chest tighten with an unfamiliar responsibility. "What's your name?" she asked as they paused in the shadow of a dumpster, checking to make sure they hadn't been followed. "I don't." His face contorted with frustration and something close to panic. "I don't know. I should know. Why don't I know?" "It's okay," Sophia said, though nothing about this was okay. We'll figure it out. By the time they reached Grace Community Shelter, dawn was breaking over Sacramento, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Sophia pushed through the back entrance, the one Pastor Raymond had shown her for early morning volunteers, and found him already in the kitchen preparing for breakfast service. Pastor Raymond looked up from the industrial stove, his expression shifting from welcome to concern the moment he saw Sophia's companion. "Sophia? What's going on?" "I need your help," she said, guiding the stranger to a chair. "I found him in the railyard. He's disoriented, confused. Someone was looking for him. Not police, someone else. And I think he's in danger." Pastor Raymond approached slowly, his eyes taking in the expensive suit, the Rolex, the obvious signs of wealth. "Son, what's your name?" The stranger's hands shook as he reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a leather wallet with fumbling fingers. He opened it, staring at the driver's license inside like it was written in a foreign language. "Hamilton Holmes," he read slowly. "It says my name is Hamilton Holmes. But I don't remember. I don't remember any of it." "Hamilton," Pastor Raymond repeated, his voice gentle but cautious. "Do you remember how you ended up in the railyard?" "No. I remember fragments. Lights. Voices. Someone saying I needed to rest. Then nothing until I woke up in that place." Hamilton looked up, his eyes desperate. "Why can't I remember?" Pastor Raymond exchanged a long look with Sophia, and she could read the conflict written across his weathered face. Harboring someone who might be dangerous, who might be running from something legitimate, who might bring trouble to a shelter already operating on thin margins, it went against every practical instinct. But turning away someone in genuine need went against everything he stood for. 3 days, Pastor Raymond finally said. "You can stay for 3 days, but you work for your keep. Kitchen duty, cleaning, whatever needs doing. And if I get even a hint that you're a danger to anyone here." "I understand," Hamilton said quickly. "Thank you. I don't know what else to say except thank you." "You can start by washing your hands and helping prep breakfast," Pastor Raymond replied, pointing toward the industrial sink. "Sophia, show him where the aprons are." Over the next few hours, Sophia watched Hamilton struggle with basic tasks that should have been simple. He couldn't remember how to properly hold a broom, fumbled with the dish sprayer, and needed instructions for organizing food trays. But when Pastor Raymond asked him to reorganize the dry goods pantry that had become chaotic over weeks of rushed meal prep, something shifted. Hamilton stood in front of the shelves for a long moment, his expression distant and focused. Then his hands began moving with sudden purpose and precision, grouping items by category, creating a systematic arrangement that made immediate practical sense, labeling sections with clear, efficient handwriting. It was the movement of someone whose muscle memory understood organization and protocol even when their conscious mind had forgotten. "You've done this kind of work before," Pastor Raymond observed, watching from the doorway. "I must have," Hamilton replied, staring at his own hands with confusion. "But I don't remember where or when. It's like my hands know things my brain doesn't." Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. Who forgets their entire life but remembers how to create medical-grade organizational systems? That evening, as the shelter prepared to close for the night, Pastor Raymond showed Hamilton to a cot in the back storage room. Not the main dormitory where most residents slept, but a smaller, more private space usually reserved for emergency situations. "Get some rest," Pastor Raymond said. "Tomorrow we'll figure out next steps. Maybe contact some hospitals, see if anyone's reported you missing." "No," Hamilton said sharply, then softened his tone. "I mean, not yet. Please. I don't know why, but the thought of hospitals, of doctors, it makes me—" He trailed off, unable to articulate the fear. After Pastor Raymond left, Sophia lingered in the doorway. "You'll be safe here tonight," she said quietly. Hamilton looked up at her from where he sat on the edge of the cot. "Why did you help me? You don't know me. You don't know what I might have done." "I know what it's like to have nowhere else to go," Sophia replied simply. As she turned to leave, she glanced back one final time. Hamilton was staring at his hands, turning them over slowly in the dim light, his expression a mixture of frustration and something else, recognition struggling to surface through layers of fog. Like his hands held answers his mind refused to access. If this story is keeping you hooked, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing, but it means everything to me. Plus, You'll never miss what happens next in stories like this. Trust me, you don't want to miss where this goes. Sophia left the shelter that night with more questions than answers, but one certainty echoed in her mind. Hamilton Holmes wasn't just confused. He was terrified of remembering. Day 3 at Grace Community Shelter began like the previous two. Hamilton arrived in the kitchen before dawn, wearing borrowed clothes from the donation bin and an expression of quiet determination. Sophia had started coming earlier than usual, telling herself it was to help with prep work, not to observe the mysterious stranger who disrupted her already chaotic life. "Morning," Hamilton said softly as she entered. "Pastor Raymond has me on breakfast duty. Apparently I'm improving." Sophia watched as he moved to the prep station, selected a chef's knife from the magnetic strip, and began dicing onions for the morning scramble. Her breath caught. His movements were fluid, precise, professional, the knife dancing through vegetables with the kind of efficiency that came from thousands of hours of practice. Each cut was uniform, measured, executed with unconscious expertise. "Where did you learn to do that?" she asked, unable to hide her suspicion. Hamilton paused, staring down at the perfectly diced onions as if seeing them for the first time. I don't know. My hands just knew what to do." He set the knife down carefully, his expression troubled. "It keeps happening. Little things. I reach for tools in places I somehow know they'll be. I organize things in patterns that feel correct, but I can't explain why." After breakfast service ended, Pastor Raymond asked Hamilton to reorganize the walk-in refrigerator that had become cluttered with donations and leftover meal components. Sophia volunteered to help, but mostly she watched as Hamilton transformed chaos into systematic order. He created distinct zones: proteins on the bottom shelves arranged by expiration date, vegetables grouped by type and preparation method, dairy products aligned with labels facing forward for quick identification. He used tape and markers to create clear labeling protocols, his handwriting neat and standardized. It wasn't the work of someone organizing a kitchen. It was the work of someone who'd spent years managing inventory in high-stakes environments where precision mattered. "This is how you'd organize a hospital supply room," Sophia said quietly. "Or a laboratory." Hamilton turned to her, his face pale. "How would you know that?" "Because I volunteered at a medical clinic last year. This is exactly how they organized their supplies." She stepped closer. "Hamilton, who are you really?" "I don't know," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "But you're right. These patterns feel medical, clinical, like I'm following protocols I can't remember learning." Their conversation was interrupted by Pastor Raymond appearing in the doorway. "Sophia, can I see you for a moment?" In the main kitchen, Pastor Raymond's expression was grave. Two men came by this morning asking questions. Well-dressed, professional. They were showing a photograph at the bodega next door, asking if anyone had seen a missing person. Sophia's stomach tightened. What did the bodega owner say? That he'd keep an eye out. "But Sophia, they're working their way down the block. They'll be here eventually." Through the kitchen window, Sophia could see two figures in dark suits entering the corner store across the street. They moved with purpose, authority. Not police, something else. Back in the kitchen, Hamilton was washing dishes when a police siren wailed past on the street outside. He froze completely, his hands gripping the edge of the sink until his knuckles went white, his entire body rigid with a fear that went beyond simple startlement. The siren faded, but Hamilton remained motionless for several seconds before slowly returning to his task. "You okay?" Sophia asked. "I don't know why," Hamilton said without turning around. "But sirens make me feel like I need to run. Hide. Disappear." That afternoon, as they cleaned up from lunch service, Pastor Raymond's old radio played classical music from the local NPR station. Sophia was wiping down tables when she heard it. Hamilton humming along to Vivaldi's "For Seasons," the melody flowing from him naturally, unconsciously. Then he stopped abruptly, his eyes wide. "I know this piece," he breathed. "I know the name of it. I can hear the next movement before it plays." "How do I know this?" Sophia set down her rag and approached him carefully. "Hamilton, you need to tell me the truth about these fragments you're remembering. What are you seeing?" He sank into one of the plastic chairs, his hands trembling. Sterile rooms. White walls. Bright lights that hurt to look at. People in masks hovering over something. Someone. Machines beeping. And voices. Urgent voices saying things I can't quite make out. Numbers, maybe. Medical terminology. He looked up at her desperately. And underneath it all, this feeling of responsibility, like lives were depending on me getting something right. You're a doctor, Sophia said, though it wasn't really a question anymore. Maybe. Or I was. But then why can't I remember? His voice rose with frustration. Why can I dice vegetables like a professional chef and organize supplies like a hospital administrator, but I can't remember my own life? Before Sophia could respond, the shelter's front door opened. A woman in an elegant navy suit entered, her heels clicking on the worn linoleum. She was maybe 45, blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, carrying herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting answers. Pastor Raymond moved to greet her. Can I help you? I hope so, the woman said, pulling a flyer from her leather portfolio. I'm looking for this man. He's been missing for several days, and his family is very worried. Sophia's blood turned to ice as she glimpsed the photograph on the flyer. It was Hamilton, cleaner, healthier, but unmistakably him. And beneath the photo, a name that wasn't Hamilton Holmes at all. Dr. Hamilton Westfield, renowned cardiac surgeon. Missing since Tuesday. Pastor Raymond studied the flyer carefully. What makes you think he'd be in this area? His phone last pinged near the railyard 3 days ago, the woman replied. I'm a private investigator hired by Sacramento Memorial Hospital. Dr. Westfield had been showing signs of instability before his disappearance. Erratic behavior, paranoid statements. We're concerned he may be experiencing a mental health crisis and could be a danger to himself. In the kitchen, Hamilton had gone perfectly still, listening to every word. Sophia met his eyes across the room and saw terror written in every line of his face. I haven't seen anyone matching that description, Pastor Raymond said carefully. But I'll keep the flyer. If he turns up, who should I contact? The woman handed him a business card. Thank you. And please, if you do see him, don't approach alone. Call immediately. He may not be himself. After she left, the shelter felt too quiet, too small, too dangerous. Would you trust someone who couldn't remember their own identity? Or would you turn them in to protect yourself? Comment below. Hamilton emerged from the kitchen, his face ashen. Did she say I was a cardiac surgeon? According to the flyer, yes, Pastor Raymond said softly. Then why? Hamilton whispered. Do I feel more terrified of that truth than I do of not knowing anything at all? The afternoon stretched into evening, but the tension in Grace Community Shelter refused to dissipate. Hamilton had retreated to the storage room, and Pastor Raymond busied himself with administrative work, leaving Sophia alone with the private investigator's flyer and a growing sense that nothing about this situation was what it appeared to be. She slipped out of the shelter just before closing time, walking the 12 blocks to the Sacramento Public Library. The computers were free for 2 hours with a library card she'd gotten her first week of independence, back when she still believed information and planning could solve anything. Sophia typed Dr. Hamilton Westfield Sacramento into the search bar and watched as dozens of results populated the screen. The first article was from the Sacramento Bee, dated 6 days ago. Renowned cardiac surgeon missing after reported breakdown. She clicked through, her eyes scanning rapidly. Dr. Hamilton Westfield, 42, one of Sacramento Memorial Hospital's most respected cardiac surgeons, had failed to show up for a scheduled surgery last Wednesday. Colleagues reported he'd been behaving erratically in the days prior, missing meetings, making accusations against staff members, expressing paranoid concerns about hospital protocols. Another article from a medical news site detailed his impressive career, Stanford Medical School, groundbreaking work in pediatric cardiac surgery, numerous awards and publications. A photograph showed him in surgical scrubs, confident and composed, a different person entirely from the confused man hiding in the shelter's storage room. Sophia dug deeper, finding a statement from the hospital's PR department expressing concern for Dr. Westfield's well-being and asking anyone with information to contact authorities. But buried in the comments section of a local news blog, she found something else. Anonymous posts from people claiming to be hospital staff, suggesting Dr. Westfield's breakdown had come immediately after he'd raised concerns about patient safety and supply chain irregularities. The hospital had dismissed those comments as unfounded conspiracy theories. She printed every article she could find, using the last of her print credits, and walked back to the shelter through the darkening streets with a manila folder full of Dr. Hamilton Westfield's stolen life. Hamilton was in the kitchen when she returned, mechanically washing dishes that were already clean. The shelter was empty now except for Pastor Raymond's office light glowing in the back. "Hamilton," Sophia said softly. He turned, and she saw something in his expression that hadn't been there before, a flicker of recognition mixed with dread, as if part of him already knew what she'd discovered. She spread the printed articles across the clean kitchen counter. Dr. Hamilton Westfield, Stanford graduate, pediatric cardiac surgeon, winner of the 2023 California Medical Association's Excellence in Surgery Award. She looked up at him. "That's you." Hamilton's hands gripped the edge of the sink. I can't. "Look at the photo," Sophia insisted gently, sliding the article toward him. He looked, and something inside him cracked open. "Oh God," he whispered, his legs buckling slightly. He caught himself against the counter. "I remember. The surgical theater. The lights. I was operating on a child. 8 years old, congenital heart defect. Everything was going perfectly until..." He stopped, his breathing ragged. "Until it wasn't. The equipment malfunctioned. The bypass machine. It should have been impossible. We'd checked everything, but something was wrong with the tubing. Substandard. Degraded." Sophia stayed silent, letting the memories pour out. "The child survived, but barely. And when I went back to check the equipment logs, the serial numbers didn't match what we'd ordered. Someone had switched out the medical-grade supplies with inferior substitutes." His voice grew stronger, more focused. "I started investigating. 3 months of cases. 6 patients with unexpected complications, all using the same compromised equipment from the same supplier." "What did you do?" Sophia asked. "I confronted my head surgical nurse, Diane Morrison. She managed all our supply orders, had access to everything. I showed her the evidence, the serial number discrepancies, the patient outcomes, the financial records showing payments to a supplier that didn't exist in our approved vendor list." Hamilton's hands were shaking now. She denied everything. Said I was stressed, overworked, seeing patterns that weren't there. She offered me coffee in her office while we talked about it. She was so calm, so concerned about me. "The coffee," Sophia said, understanding flooding through her. "The last thing I remember is drinking it. Diane talking about taking time off, getting help. Then nothing. Just fragments of confusion and fear until I woke up in that railyard." He looked at Sophia with anguished eyes. "How many days did I lose? What did she do to me?" Sophia checked the article dates against the timeline. "You disappeared last Tuesday. Today is Friday. You lost 4 days, Hamilton." "For days," he repeated hollowly. "She had 4 days to cover her tracks, to discredit me, to make sure no one would believe anything I said." He laughed bitterly. "And look at me now. No one would believe the homeless man in donated clothes who can't even remember his own address." "I believe you," Sophia said firmly. Hamilton met her eyes, and for the first time since she'd found him, she saw not just confusion or fear, but determination. "Why? You have no reason to trust me." "Because someone powerful enough to make a respected surgeon disappear doesn't do it over a mental breakdown," Sophia replied. "They do it because he found something they needed to bury." Hamilton pushed away from the counter, pacing the small kitchen. "Medical equipment fraud at that scale, we're talking millions of dollars. And if patients were harmed, if families found out their loved ones suffered because someone substituted cheap equipment to pocket the difference." He stopped, running his hands through his hair. Diane wasn't working alone. She couldn't be. This kind of operation requires access at multiple levels: purchasing, inventory, administration. "Then we need proof," Sophia said. "Evidence that can't be discredited even if you are." "I had files," Hamilton said suddenly. "Patient records, supply manifests, financial documents. I kept everything in my office at the hospital. But if Diane knew I was investigating..." "They're already gone," Sophia finished. Hamilton sank into a chair, the weight of his situation finally crushing him completely. "Then it's over. She wins. I have nothing. If you discovered someone had deliberately erased days of your life, what would be your first move? Drop your answer in the comments." But Sophia was thinking about the private investigator's words, about mental health crises and erratic behavior, and the carefully constructed narrative that had already painted Hamilton as unstable. She was thinking about how easy it would be to dismiss a man with no memory, no home, no credibility. And she was thinking about what it meant that Diane Morrison had gone to such elaborate lengths to destroy him. lengths that suggested she was still afraid of what he might remember. "Hamilton," Sophia said slowly. "If you had proof, where would you have hidden it?" "Somewhere she couldn't reach." He looked up, and in his eyes, she saw the flicker of possibility breaking through despair. "My locker at the hospital," Hamilton said, his voice gaining strength as memories crystallized. "I kept backup files there. Physical copies Diane wouldn't know about." But Sophia was already shaking her head. "If she went to this much trouble, she's already searched your locker. That's the first place she'd look." Hamilton slumped back in his chair, and Sophia watched the brief spark of hope die in his eyes. She hated seeing it, hated the helplessness that reminded her too much of her own life. Always one step behind systems designed to keep people like them powerless. "Walk me through it," Sophia said, pulling up a chair across from him. "Everything you remember about the investigation. Start from the beginning." Hamilton closed his eyes, and when he spoke, his voice took on the clinical precision of someone used to documenting details. "It started 6 months ago. A 12-year-old boy, routine valve replacement. Everything was textbook perfect until the bypass machine showed irregular pressure readings mid-surgery. We compensated, completed the procedure, but the boy had complications during recovery. Longer than expected. You think the equipment was already compromised back then? I didn't at first. But then it happened again. And again. Always different cases, different surgeons, but similar patterns. Equipment behaving just slightly off-spec. Patients taking longer to recover. Outcomes that were good but not excellent." He opened his eyes. In cardiac surgery, good but not excellent can mean the difference between a child running track in high school or being on medication for life. Sophia felt a chill. "How many patients?" 6 that I could document with certainty. Probably more I missed. Hamilton's hands clenched into fists. "I started tracking serial numbers on the equipment we used. Medical-grade surgical supplies have certification numbers that correspond to manufacturing batches. When I cross-referenced our purchase orders with what was actually being used in surgery, nothing matched. Someone was swapping them," Sophia said. "Buying cheap knockoffs that look identical but use inferior materials, then selling the medical-grade originals on the black market. A single cardiac bypass kit costs the hospital $30,000. Multiply that across hundreds of surgeries, multiple hospitals." Hamilton shook his head. "We're talking about millions in profit. And Diane Morrison controlled all the supply orders. Every single one. I confronted her in her office on Tuesday morning, or what I thought was Tuesday morning. I had 3 months of documentation, patient records, serial number discrepancies, everything." His voice grew bitter. "She listened so patiently. Told me I looked exhausted. Offered me coffee while we talked through my concerns. Said she wanted to help me understand the procurement process better." Sophia thought about the drugged coffee, about 4 missing days, about waking up disoriented in a railyard. She's done this before. She's too practiced. "That's what terrifies me," Hamilton admitted. "This wasn't a desperate improvisation. This was a protocol." The next morning, they returned to the library. Hamilton's hands shook as he logged into his hospital email account, using a password that had come to him in fragments during a restless night, the combination of his daughter's birthday and his medical school graduation year. The inbox told its own story. Automated notifications from HR about his voluntary medical leave. Concerned emails from colleagues hoping he was getting the help he needed. A formal letter from hospital administration placing him on indefinite paid suspension pending a fitness for duty evaluation. "Look at the dates," Hamilton said, his voice hollow. "These emails about my voluntary leave started the same day I confronted Diane. She had this planned before I even woke up in that railyard." Sophia scrolled through the messages, finding one that made her stomach turn. It was from Dr. Patricia Vance, the chief of surgery, expressing concern about Hamilton's increasingly erratic behavior and unfounded accusations against dedicated staff members. The email referenced documented incidents of Hamilton's instability over the past 2 weeks. "But you said you only started investigating 6 months ago," Sophia said. "These accusations make it sound like you've been unstable for weeks." Because she's been building a narrative, Hamilton realized. Creating a paper trail that makes everything I discovered look like paranoid delusions. By the time I woke up and tried to tell anyone what I found, I'd already been discredited. He clicked through more emails, finding carefully worded statements from nurses and administrators expressing concern about Dr. Westfield's unusual behavior and conspiracy theories. Each one adding another layer to Diane's constructed reality. She's untouchable, Hamilton said finally, logging out of the account. Even if I tried to go public now, I'd look exactly like what she's painted me as, an unstable doctor having a breakdown. And without physical evidence. You'd be destroyed, Sophia finished. They'd commit you for psychiatric evaluation, and by the time you got out, the story would be permanently sealed. They walked back to the shelter in silence, both understanding the impossible position Hamilton was in. At the shelter entrance, he stopped and turned to face her. I need to disappear, he said quietly. Really disappear. New city, new identity. Start over somewhere Diane Morrison's reach doesn't extend. You're just going to let her win? Sophia couldn't keep the anger from her voice. I'm going to survive, Hamilton corrected. That's all I have left. He went inside to pack the few belongings he'd accumulated, donated clothes, a toiletry kit from Pastor Raymond, the wallet that identified him as Hamilton Holmes instead of Hamilton Westfield. Sophia stood on the shelter steps, her phone in her hand, mindlessly scrolling through news sites while her thoughts churned. Then she saw it. A headline from Sacramento Memorial's community outreach page. Local teen awaits life-saving surgery. The article described Emma Westfield, a 16-year-old girl born with a congenital heart defect that had worsened dramatically in recent months. She needed a complex surgical procedure that only a handful of surgeons in California were qualified to perform. The article included a quote from the family's doctor. We've consulted with several specialists, but Dr. Hamilton Westfield at Sacramento Memorial is uniquely experienced with this type of case. Unfortunately, due to his current unavailability, we're exploring other options. Sophia's hands went numb as she read the name again. Emma Westfield. She ran inside, finding Hamilton near the back door with his backpack slung over his shoulder. Wait, she gasped, shoving the phone toward him. You need to see this. Hamilton read the article, his face going progressively paler with each line. When he reached Emma's name, he made a sound like he'd been physically struck. That's your daughter, Sophia said, though she could see he already knew. Stories like this take hours to research and write. If you're invested in finding out what happens to Sophia and Hamilton, the subscribe button is right there. One click shows me you care about these stories. Don't let me down. I haven't seen Emma in 3 years, Hamilton whispered. Her mother got full custody after the divorce. Said I was married to my work, that Emma deserved better than a father who was always at the hospital. He looked up at Sophia, devastation written across his features. Now she needs me, and I'm. He gestured at himself. Homeless, discredited, with no legal identity he could safely use. So what are you going to do? Sophia asked. Hamilton stared at his daughter's photo on the screen for a long moment. Then he set down his backpack with trembling hands. I have absolutely no idea. Hamilton couldn't stop staring at his daughter's photograph. Emma had been 13 the last time he'd seen her. Braces, awkward teenage angles, still willing to hug him goodbye despite the custody battle. Now she was 16, her face more mature, but still holding traces of the little girl who used to wait for him in the hospital cafeteria, coloring pictures while he finished his rounds. She needs a cono procedure, Hamilton said, his voice thick with emotion. It's incredibly complex. You have to reconstruct the aortic root while replacing the valve, and in teenagers the anatomy is still developing. One wrong measurement, one moment of hesitation. His hands trembled as he held the phone. I've performed 17 of these procedures. Successfully. I literally wrote the protocol Sacramento Memorial uses. Then you have to do it, Sophia said. How? Hamilton's voice cracked. The moment I walk into that hospital, Diane will have me committed. And even if I could somehow get into an operating room, no one would let a homeless man with no credentials anywhere near a patient. He laughed bitterly. I spent 15 years building a reputation, and she destroyed it in 4 days. Sophia watched him pace the small shelter kitchen, his professional instinct warring visibly with his survival instinct. What about another surgeon? You said there are others qualified. Qualified on paper, maybe. But Emma's case is unusual. Her heart condition combined with previous surgeries makes the anatomy incredibly complicated. The other surgeons would be working from textbook protocols. They'd be competent, but he stopped, his face anguished. In surgery like this, competent isn't enough. She needs someone who knows every possible complication before it happens, who can adapt in real time when things go wrong. She needs the surgeon who pioneered the technique. She needs her father, Sophia said softly. Before Hamilton could respond, the shelter's front door opened. Sophia's breath caught as she recognized the woman from the previous day, the private investigator in the Navy suit. But she wasn't alone. Two men in hospital security uniforms flanked her, and she carried a leather portfolio that she opened with practiced efficiency as she approached Pastor Raymond at the front desk. Pastor Raymond, the woman said, her voice professionally sympathetic. I'm Catherine Wells, and I believe you may be harboring Dr. Hamilton Westfield. I have documentation here authorizing his immediate transfer to psychiatric care for his own safety. In the kitchen, Hamilton grabbed Sophia's arm. I have to run, he whispered urgently. But Pastor Raymond's voice stopped him. Ms. Wells, I'm going to need to see proper identification and verify these documents before I. Of course, Catherine. No, Diane, Sophia realized with sickening clarity, interrupted smoothly. She pulled out a hospital ID badge. I'm Diane Morrison, head surgical nurse at Sacramento Memorial. Dr. Westfield is one of our most valued colleagues, and we're deeply concerned about his well-being. Sophia felt Hamilton go rigid beside her. Diane continued. These documents are signed by Dr. Patricia Morrison, no relation, our psychiatric consultant. They authorize a 72-hour hold for evaluation. Dr. Westfield has been experiencing a severe mental health crisis, making unfounded accusations, exhibiting paranoid behavior. We just want to help him. I'd like to speak with Dr. Westfield first, Pastor Raymond said firmly. That's not advisable. He may become agitated or... Nevertheless, Pastor Raymond's tone left no room for argument. Diane's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course. Hamilton, she called toward the kitchen. Sweetie, it's Diane. We've been so worried about you. Hamilton emerged slowly from the kitchen, and Sophia followed, staying close to his side. Up close, Diane Morrison was maybe 50, with perfectly styled auburn hair and a face that radiated concern, except for her eyes, which held all the warmth of surgical steel. Hamilton, thank God, Diane said, moving toward him with arms slightly extended. You've had us all terrified, but it's going to be okay now. We're going to get you the help you need. I don't need help, Hamilton said, his voice surprisingly steady. I need you to tell the truth about what you did. Diane's expression shifted to pained sympathy. Sweetheart, this is exactly what Dr. Morrison warned us about. The paranoid ideation, the accusations against staff. This is why we need to get you somewhere safe, where you can make sure I never remember what I discovered, Hamilton finished. The security guards moved closer, and Sophia saw Pastor Raymond step between them and Hamilton. Now wait just a minute. If Dr. Westfield doesn't want to go, the hold is legal and binding, Diane said, her voice still calm but edged with steel. He's a danger to himself. These gentlemen are authorized to use reasonable measures if he resists. Sophia watched the situation spiraling, watched Hamilton's face cycle through fear and anger and desperate calculation. Then his eyes locked with hers, and in that moment, she saw him make a decision. Pastor Raymond, please, Hamilton said, his voice clear and carrying. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Ms. Morrison is right. I need help. Pastor Raymond looked shocked. Hamilton, you don't have to. I do. Hamilton took a step toward the security guards, then paused near Sophia. His hand briefly touched her arm, and he leaned close enough to whisper, his voice so low only she could hear. My locker at the hospital. Combination 72315, patient file for Emma. Get it to Dr. Ramsey. She'll understand. Then louder, to Diane. Can I at least get my things? Of course, Diane said magnanimously. We're not monsters, Hamilton. We just want you well. As Hamilton moved toward the storage room, Sophia caught the look Diane gave her, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, an assessment that made Sophia feel like a problem being cataloged for later resolution. You must be Sophia, Diane said conversationally. Pastor Raymond mentioned you've been volunteering here. How kind of you to help with our confused friend. Sophia didn't trust herself to speak, so she just nodded. Hamilton returned with his backpack, and the security guards positioned themselves on either side of him. As they guided him toward the door, he looked back at Sophia one final time, his eyes pleading with her to understand, to believe, to act. At the doorway, Diane paused and turned back to Sophia. Word of advice, dear. Sometimes kindness to strangers brings more trouble than it's worth. I'd hate to see a young girl with your whole life ahead of her get caught up in someone else's delusions. Her smile widened. Take care of yourself. Then they were gone, and the shelter felt impossibly empty. Would you break into a hospital to help someone you barely know? Or would you protect yourself first? Tell me in the comments what you'd choose. Sophia stood frozen for a long moment, Diane's veiled threat echoing in her mind alongside Hamilton's whispered instructions. 7:23:15. Patient file for Emma. Dr. Ramsey. Pastor Raymond approached her, his face troubled. Sophia, I don't know what just happened, but I think I need to borrow your car. Sophia interrupted. What? What? Sophia met his eyes. Because sometimes the right thing to do is also the most dangerous. And I'm tired of letting dangerous people win. Pastor Raymond didn't ask questions when he handed Sophia his car keys at 11:47 p.m. He just squeezed her shoulder and said, Be careful. And if you're not back by dawn, I'm calling the police. If I'm not back by dawn, Sophia replied, the police are probably the least of my problems. Sacramento Memorial Hospital loomed against the night sky like a monument to both healing and secrets. Sophia parked Pastor Raymond's ancient Honda Civic 3 blocks away and approached on foot, her volunteer badge from St. Francis Community Clinic pinned to her shirt. Different hospital, but the badges looked similar enough in dim lighting, and night shift staff were usually too tired to scrutinize credentials closely. The main entrance was too visible, too monitored. Instead, Sophia headed for the employee entrance near the loading docks, where a smoking nurse held the door open just long enough for her to slip through with a muttered thanks. Inside, the hospital's night rhythm was quieter but still active, machines beeping, distant conversations, the squeak of shoes on linoleum. Sophia kept her head down, walking with the purposeful stride of someone who belonged, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd memorized the hospital layout using Google Maps and the facility directory on Sacramento Memorial's website. Surgical staff locker rooms were on the 3rd floor, East Wing. She took the stairs instead of the elevator, avoiding security cameras where possible, and emerged into a corridor that smelled of antiseptic and exhaustion. A nurse passed her going the opposite direction, barely glancing up from her phone. Sophia exhaled slowly and continued forward. The locker room door was locked, but the badge reader accepted her St. Francis credentials. The hospital systems apparently shared a universal medical facility database. Inside, rows of metal lockers lined the walls, each labeled with a name. She found Hamilton's in the 2nd row, Dr. H. Westfield. The combination lock was standard issue. 7:23:15. Sophia's hands shook as she spun the dial right, then left, then right again. It didn't open. She tried again, slower this time, making sure each number clicked precisely into place. Still nothing. Come on, she whispered, trying a 3rd time. This time, when she pulled, the lock released with a soft click that sounded deafening in the empty locker room. Inside, Hamilton's locker was meticulously organized, exactly what she'd expect from someone with his precision. Scrubs folded neatly, a white coat hanging from a hook, personal items in a small basket. And in the back, tucked behind a cardiology textbook, a thick manila folder secured with rubber bands. Sophia grabbed the folder and headed for the nearest bathroom, locking herself in a stall before pulling off the rubber bands with trembling fingers. The first document was Emma Westfield's complete medical chart, dozens of pages detailing a heart condition Sophia didn't fully understand but could recognize as serious. Surgical notes from previous procedures, consultation reports from multiple specialists, and throughout, Hamilton's handwriting in the margins, documenting observations with clinical precision. But it was the recent notes that made Sophia's blood run cold. Pre-op blood work shows elevated markers, inconsistent with previous baseline. Recommend additional testing before proceeding. Requested equipment verification for upcoming procedure. Standard protocol denied by DM reason given. Unnecessary delay for routine surgery. Emma's case assigned to Surgical Team B. DM listed as primary equipment coordinator. This is not standard protocol for high-risk cases. DM Diane Morrison. Sophia flipped through more pages, finding Hamilton's increasingly urgent documentation. He'd been tracking Emma's pre-surgical care, noticing the same irregularities he'd seen in other cases, subtle changes in protocols, equipment selections that didn't match standard procedures for complex surgeries, delays in testing that should have been routine. Then she found a note dated the day before Hamilton's disappearance, his handwriting almost frantic. DM has positioned herself as equipment coordinator for Emma's surgery. Same pattern as previous cases. She's going to use compromised supplies. My daughter's surgery is scheduled for next week, and Diane Morrison is planning to ensure it fails, confronting her tomorrow morning with evidence. If anything happens to me, this file goes to Dr. Ramsey and hospital board. But something had happened to him, and the file had stayed hidden until now. Sophia's hands went numb as she realized the full scope of Diane's plan. Discrediting Hamilton wasn't enough. She was going to eliminate his daughter, the one person whose loss would completely destroy him. And in doing so, she'd bury the last piece of evidence that could expose her. What parent could credibly accuse someone of murder after losing a child in surgery? Everyone would see it as grief-driven delusion. She was about to close the folder when she noticed a separate section at the back, paper-clipped and marked Personal, Do Not File. Sophia opened it and found herself staring at a birth certificate. The paper was old, slightly yellowed, official state of California documentation. Born March 15th, 18 years ago. Name, Sophia Marie Westfield. Father, Dr. Hamilton Westfield. Mother, Claire Elizabeth Westfield. The bathroom's fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright, the walls too close. Sophia's vision tunneled as she read her own name. Not Martinez, the name she'd carried through a dozen foster homes, but Westfield. Her hands shook as she flipped to the next page. Death certificate. Same date, 3 days after birth. Infant Sophia Marie Westfield. Cause, complications from premature birth. Attending physician, Dr. Patricia Morrison. Presiding nurse, Diane Morrison, RN. The world tilted sideways. Sophia braced herself against the bathroom stall, her breathing coming in short gasps. 18 years ago, Hamilton Westfield's daughter. Declared dead. But she wasn't dead. She was sitting in a hospital bathroom, very much alive, staring at documentation of her own impossible existence. Diane Morrison had been there. Diane Morrison, who'd just taken Hamilton away, who was planning to let his daughter die in surgery, had been the nurse present when infant Sophia was declared deceased. But Sophia Martinez had entered foster care as an abandoned infant with no family information, no birth certificate, no history before 3 days old. The social worker had always said she'd been left at a fire station with no identification. Someone had erased Sophia Westfield and created Sophia Martinez. Someone had taken a newborn from her father and made her disappear into a system where she'd never be found. The same someone who, 18 years later, was trying to destroy Hamilton all over again. Imagine finding out your entire identity was a lie. What would be the first question you'd ask? Comment below. Sophia's phone buzzed in her pocket, making her jump. A text from an unknown number appeared on the screen. You were supposed to stay dead. Her blood turned to ice as the next message loaded. Now you've left me no choice. Your father dies in surgery tomorrow unless you bring me that file and disappear again. This time, permanently. Sophia stared at the phone, then at the birth certificate in her shaking hands. Diane Morrison knew, had always known. And now, 18 years after faking an infant's death, she was ready to finish what she'd started. Sophia couldn't stop staring at the death certificate. Her death certificate. The official document declaring that Sophia Marie Westfield had died 3 days after birth from complications related to premature delivery. Except she hadn't died. She'd been erased. Her earliest memories surfaced unbidden, being maybe 4 years old in a foster home in Stockton, asking her foster mother why she didn't have a mommy and daddy like the other kids. The woman had knelt down and said gently, "You were left at a fire station, sweetie. Sometimes parents can't take care of their babies, so they leave them somewhere safe. That's all we know about you. No birth certificate, no family history, no medical records from before 3 days old. Just Sophia Martinez, abandoned infant, ward of the state." But that had been a lie. All of it. Her phone buzzed again, and Sophia's hands jerked, nearly dropping the documents. Another text from the unknown number. "I'm sure you have questions. Let me answer the most important one. Yes. I've known who you were since the moment you walked into that shelter. Did you really think it was coincidence that I found Hamilton there?" Sophia's breath came in short gasps. Diane had been watching her. For how long? Since she'd brought Hamilton to the shelter? Since before? Another text appeared. "Your father was always too curious for his own good. 18 years ago, he started asking questions about hospital protocols, about his wife's delivery, about what happened to his baby girl. So we gave him answers he could accept. Grief makes people easy to manipulate. Sophia's hands shook as she typed back, "What did you do to my mother?" The response came within seconds. "Claire Westfield died during childbirth. That part was real. But you survived, Sophia. A healthy, perfect baby girl. And when your father started investigating irregularities in the maternity ward, always the hero, always the investigator, we realized you were leverage. Insurance. A way to control a man who asked too many questions. So you told him I died and gave me away. We saved you, actually. Placed you with a woman who owed us a favor, someone who left you at that fire station with no questions asked. You disappeared into the foster system, untraceable. And Hamilton stopped investigating. Stopped asking questions about supply discrepancies and suspicious patient outcomes. For 18 years, he behaved. Until 6 months ago, when he forgot what he had to lose. Sophia's vision blurred with tears and rage. Her entire life, 18 years of foster homes, of wondering who she was, of feeling like she didn't belong anywhere, had been a punishment for her father's integrity. Another text. "Now you've left me no choice. Your father dies in surgery tomorrow unless you bring me that file and disappear again. This time, permanently." The threat was clear, but Sophia's mind was racing. Diane couldn't just kill Hamilton. It would be too suspicious, too many questions. But a surgery gone wrong, especially after his documented mental health crisis and paranoid accusations, that would look like tragic vindication of the narrative Diane had constructed. The unstable doctor whose own paranoia prevented him from helping his daughter. And Emma. Emma would die too. Hamilton's other daughter, the one he'd been allowed to keep, used as a final weapon to destroy him completely. Sophia's hands stopped shaking as a cold clarity settled over her. She pulled out her phone's camera and began photographing every page of the file. Emma's medical records, Hamilton's documentation of the equipment fraud, the supply chain discrepancies, the notes about Diane's positioning herself for Emma's surgery, and finally, her own birth and death certificates. She photographed everything twice, making sure every word was legible, then uploaded the photos to a cloud storage account she created on the spot. Only then did she tuck the original documents back into the manila folder. As she exited the bathroom, a security guard rounded the corner. Sophia's heart stopped, but she forced herself to walk normally, offering a tired smile. "Long shift," she said casually. "Tell me about it." The guard replied, barely glancing at her as he continued past. Sophia made it out of the hospital and back to Pastor Raymond's car without further incident. But as she sat in the driver's seat, keys in hand, she couldn't make herself start the engine. The pre-dawn darkness was beginning to soften into gray. Somewhere in this hospital, Hamilton was being held, probably sedated, definitely under Diane's control. And tomorrow, Emma would arrive for surgery, unknowing that the woman managing her equipment supply intended to ensure she never woke up. Sophia looked down at the folder in her passenger seat. This was everything Hamilton needed to expose Diane, to prove the conspiracy, to save his daughter's life. But delivering it to anyone, Dr. Ramsey, the hospital board, the police, would put a target on Sophia's back. Diane had kept her secret for 18 years. She wouldn't hesitate to eliminate that loose end permanently. Would you sacrifice yourself to save a parent you just discovered? Or would you protect the life you've built? Let me know what you'd do. Another text appeared on her phone. "You have until 6 p.m. tonight. Meet me at the hospital loading dock. Come alone, or watch your father's heart stop during what should have been a routine evaluation. Oh, and Sophia, bring the original file. I know you photographed it, but digital copies are so easy to discredit as fabrications from an unstable homeless girl with delusions about being a doctor's daughter." Sophia stared at the message, then at the folder, then at her own reflection in the rearview mirror. She'd spent 18 years being Sophia Martinez, orphan, foster kid, survivor. She'd learned to be invisible, to not ask for too much, to accept that she had no history worth claiming. But Sophia Martinez had been a lie. A comfortable lie that kept her small and powerless and alone. Sophia Westfield was someone else entirely. Someone whose father had sacrificed his peace for truth. Someone whose existence was proof of a conspiracy that had spanned nearly 2 decades. Someone who had a sister she'd never met, waiting for a surgery that would kill her. As the Sacramento sky lightened toward dawn, Sophia started the car and pulled onto the empty streets. But she wasn't heading back to the shelter. Not yet. She had 12 hours until Diane's deadline. 12 hours to figure out how to save a father she'd just discovered, a sister she'd never met, and maybe, finally, herself. The file sat in the passenger seat beside her, and Sophia understood with crystalline clarity that Diane's text hadn't been just a threat. It had been a mistake. Because in telling Sophia she was supposed to stay dead, Diane had revealed something crucial. Dead people have nothing left to lose. And that made Sophia more dangerous than Diane could possibly anticipate. Sophia drove back to the railyard as dawn broke over Sacramento, the manila folder burning like evidence on the passenger seat beside her. She parked in the same spot where she'd found Hamilton 4 days ago. Was it really only 4 days? And climbed through the familiar gap in the fence. In the abandoned warehouse that had been her home, Sophia pulled out her phone and opened the photograph documents, studying them with fresh eyes now that she understood what she was looking at. The birth certificate. March 15th, 18 years ago. Sacramento Memorial Hospital, maternity ward. She zoomed in on her mother's information. Claire Elizabeth Westfield. Date of death, March 15th. Same day Sophia was born. Her fingers flew across her phone's browser, searching for any trace of the woman who'd given birth to her and died in the process. She found a single obituary in the Sacramento Bee archives. Claire Elizabeth Westfield, 29, passed away March 15th due to complications from childbirth. She is survived by her husband, Dr. Hamilton Westfield, and infant daughter Sophia Marie. But the infant daughter hadn't survived. According to official records, she died 3 days later. Sophia's hands shook as she scrolled through Hamilton's documentation again, looking for anything about her mother, about what had really happened 18 years ago. Then she noticed something she'd missed before, a sticky note attached to her birth certificate in Hamilton's handwriting. Asked Dr. Ramsey about Claire's delivery. Something was wrong with the equipment. She suspected but couldn't prove. Dr. Ramsey. Hamilton had mentioned that name before he was taken away. Someone who would understand. Sophia searched the Sacramento Memorial Directory and found her, Dr. Jennifer Ramsey, Chief of Cardiology. She called the listed number, half expecting voicemail, but instead got an automated system. She pressed through the options until she could leave a message. Dr. Ramsey, my name is Sophia Martinez. Or, Sophia Westfield. I have files from Hamilton Westfield's locker. Evidence about Diane Morrison and the equipment fraud. And I think there's a connection to what happened to his wife 18 years ago. Please, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. She left her number and sat back against the warehouse wall, exhaustion pulling at her bones. She'd been awake for nearly 24 hours, and the emotional weight of discovering her entire identity was a fabrication threatened to crush her completely. Her phone rang 47 minutes later. Blocked number. Sophia? A woman's voice, tense and urgent. This is Dr. Jennifer Ramsey. Where are you right now? I'm at the railyard, where I found Hamilton. Listen to me very carefully. Don't go home. Don't go anywhere familiar. Don't go to the shelter. Diane has been listening. She has contacts everywhere, people who owe her favors or who are part of this. Do you understand? Sophia's mouth went dry. I understand. You said you have Hamilton's files. The equipment documentation. Yes. And my birth certificate. And a death certificate that says I died 18 years ago, except I'm obviously still alive. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, oh God, she did it again. What do you mean again? Dr. Ramsey's voice cracked slightly. Diane Morrison has been operating at Sacramento Memorial for 23 years. I've suspected her for almost a decade, but I could never prove anything. Every time I got close, something would happen. Evidence would disappear, witnesses would recant, or... She paused. Or someone I loved would receive a very pointed message about what could happen if I kept digging. Your daughter, Sophia said, remembering the text messages. Yes. 5 years ago, I discovered a pattern in surgical complications similar to what Hamilton found. I was building a case, collecting evidence. Then my daughter was in a car accident. Minor, no injuries, but the brake line had been cut. The message was clear. Dr. Ramsey's voice hardened. I backed off. I've hated myself for it every day since. But you suspected something about my mother's death. Claire Westfield's delivery should have been routine. But there were complications with the monitoring equipment, readings that didn't make sense, delays in response times. By the time we realized something was wrong, it was too late. I was just a resident then, but I remember Hamilton demanding an investigation. Then suddenly he stopped, accepted that it was a tragic accident, and threw himself into his work. Because they told him I was dead too, Sophia said. They used me as leverage to make him stop asking questions. And it worked. For 18 years, it worked. Dr. Ramsey exhaled shakily. Until he discovered the equipment fraud and started investigating again. Sophia, you need to get those files to someone who can. Sophia's phone buzzed with an incoming text. She pulled it away from her ear to look at the screen and felt her blood turn to ice. The text contained a photo attachment. It was a document she recognized, her foster care intake papers from 18 years ago. And there, in the signature line for the medical professional who'd examined the abandoned infant, was a name written in precise handwriting. Diane Morrison, RN. The accompanying text read, I saved you once when your mother failed to protect you. I can just as easily correct that mistake. Bring the file to the hospital loading dock. 6 p.m. Come alone, or watch your father's heart stop during surgery. Oh, and Sophia, you should thank me. I'm the only reason you're alive. Sophia read the message to Dr. Ramsey, her voice hollow. She's not going to let either of you walk away from this, Dr. Ramsey said. Sophia, don't go to that meeting. We'll find another way. There is no other way, Sophia interrupted. Emma's surgery is tomorrow. Hamilton's locked in a psychiatric hold, and Diane has had 18 years to build this network. How long would it take us to expose her through official channels? Days? Weeks? We don't have that kind of time. Then what are you going to do? Sophia looked at the setting sun through the warehouse's broken windows. 5:47 p.m. I'm going to give her exactly what she wants, and hope that's enough to make her careless. At 5:45 p.m., Sophia stood outside Sacramento Memorial's loading dock, the manila folder secured in her backpack. The area was dimly lit, shadowed by dumpsters and delivery trucks. Through the loading dock's open doorway, she could see a silhouette she recognized, Diane Morrison, waiting. Sophia took a deep breath and started walking forward. But before she'd taken 3 steps, she heard a car door open behind her. Don't move, Sophia. Dr. Ramsey's voice cut through the darkness. Sophia turned to see the cardiologist emerging from a sedan parked in the shadows, her face grave. She's not alone in there, and neither are you, Dr. Ramsey said, moving to stand beside Sophia. But what I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about that night 18 years ago. If you've made it this far, you're invested. You care. So here's the deal. Smash that like button, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and drop part 2 in the comments if you want to see how this ends. I put hours into this story, and your support is what keeps these coming. Don't leave me hanging. Do Sophia and Hamilton deserve a part 2? Let me know right now.